Welcome to NASDAQ Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me for this episode, we have Andrew Rosso, reputation management attorney at Mink Law and CEO of AR Media. We have Taylor Harrell, founder and CEO of Lively Company, and Jeremy Knauff, founder and CEO of Spartan Media. We're here to discuss how AI can shape public perception of the enterprise. We'll take a look at the impact of AI on brand perception, cybersecurity, and reputation management in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. This is a fantastic topic. All of those things merge together really well. Before we get into that, Andrew, let's kick it off with you. Give us a reminder, because you've been on the show a number of times, where you sit within the media cyber AI landscape.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back, Jill. It's a pleasure. So I am a brand and reputation management attorney specializing in online defamation, crisis management solutions, and of course, content moderation and regulation. And what we do at AR Media is fuse legal strategies with creative marketing to really bring a holistic approach to the business, to the team, so that they are aware from all ends of the spectrum as they move forward in developing their enterprise.
Yeah. And Taylor, tell us more about Lively.
Lively Company is a marketing and PR firm. We specialize in women-owned businesses and event production, event management, and social media.
All right. And Jeremy, we'll wrap it off with you. Where do you sit within the landscape?
So, Jill, I actually kind of stumbled into PR many years ago when I had a health crisis nearly kill me. And I spent about 2 years on my deathbed and leveraged PR to get back on the map and realize this is something that so many people need. And we pivoted to focusing on that, basically taking these great experts who are bringing great value to the market and elevating them above everything else out there.
All right. Well, we're grateful that you're here with us today and wish you continued health. Andrew, I want to kick this off with you. We talk about this all the time, and the AI integration spectrum, this can be a double sword sometimes when you think about integrating it in business operations, whether it's internal or external, forward facing. There's this rush to bring AI to market. Are you fixing a problem? Is it just a tool, or is this a sustainable product?
That's a great question, Jill. Loaded answer, but in short, yes, yes, and yes, but it depends. I think at the end of the day, this is just a balancing act, right? You have free speech measured against brand perception. And as you said, everybody wants to be the first in the room. Everybody wants to be the loudest, but that's not always necessarily a good thing when it comes to really introducing something that's safe and applicable to where this industry is at the current time.
Yeah. And Taylor, when you think about successful integrations or problematic integrations, how are you advising clients when they're out there trying to convey their story in an effective way?
I advise other women-owned founders that when you're trying to convey a message, to follow it with your heart, and to always give value towards others, and just put yourself in your competitors' shoes.
Well, let me ask this another way, Taylor. What are some of the challenges that you hear when women are trying to develop their message?
Just and challenges in terms of like, how do I approach this topic without offending others? And how would you put it in a way that is meaningful towards brand expression and even just conveying your zone of genius? And I just advise them that just being yourself and just being honest and what you're hoping will convey to the public will come across well. So just coming from a good place.
Right. So like anything else in today's day and age, you want it to be authentic and not so manufactured, even though they're leveraging experts such as you to help design that message. Jeremy, you said you come from a background of multiple disciplines. So when you think about integrating these strategies, whether it's event management, travel, PR, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the synergies? Are there some cross currents there or strategies that apply across these different disciplines?
That's a great question, Jill. And really, I think it comes down to, how does AI play a role? Is that the the foundation of the business, or is that something you're using in the business to help streamline the process, make things more effective for your clients? And that's where that decision starts, right? If you're not an AI business and you're using AI in a way to streamline things for your clients, you have to be really careful how you're doing that, because you can alienate a large part of your audience, or you can alienate vendors, partners, things like that. Google's AIO update recently is a perfect example of that. Historically, Google has been a search engine. You go there to get information. Google came on and absolutely destroyed things with this HCU update, which has run a lot of publishers out of business. And they're now pushing those answers in the AIOs. So that's an example of using it poorly, which then creates a poor brand sentiment. I've been watching the stock price. You probably follow this a lot closer than I do. It's been doing pretty badly for the last month or so because of consumer sentiment of how the company's doing. So that's an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, the market, it's been a challenging environment overall, especially for, companies like the Magnificent Seven, of which Alphabet is one of. There certainly has been a valuation reset just because of the macro environment. So I want to point that out as well. Andrew, one of my favorite topics, right? Characterizing the AI legal landscape. We're not there yet as it relates to framework, and we just can't, put a framework in place because it derives off of other existing law. How would you characterize the landscape right now?
We are very much behind. I think where we are right now is, yes, we've had a few examples of, bills being introduced. The California has their California Consumer Privacy Act, right? The CCPA, that expanded the definition of what personal information is to include those AI systems that are producing that personal information as data, right? New York has the New York AI Act that came into effect, this year, and governing the high risks of these systems within the private sector. So we are in the conversation. But at the same time, could we be moving faster? Absolutely. And that just comes to whether or not a joint task force makes more sense. And I know, we've kind of talked about that in the past, of this being more of a collaborative effort rather than a competitive one.
Right. So, well, Andrew, rather than reinventing the wheel, because we know it's a challenging legislative environment right now, right? We already have data privacy laws in place. We're seeing a lot of cybersecurity law. There's a lot of synergies that exist there as well, right? So when you think about AI and data, why not just kind of integrate that or update, privacy framework to include the word AI, because it's just implied at this point?
It is, and that's the challenge. And the reason being is that how AI has been used thus far, think of it as a chessboard, right? And we're just watching the pawns go first, so to speak. And what aspects of AI as a system, as a product, as a service is working, what isn't working. And when it comes to everyday, management of data, we still have high risk data, breach incidents, the response plans. A lot of businesses don't have these types of well-structured response plans so that when something does happen, there's a scramble, and there shouldn't be, or there should be less of a scramble when it comes to this. So bringing AI into the picture, we have to focus more on where is AI being applied? Is it being applied as a complement or a substitute? And what we've seen a lot of, unfortunately, Jill, is it's been used as a substitute.
Yeah. Well, okay, Jeremy, I always find this
Yeah.
fascinating in terms of how companies respond, right? Besides the typical detection mitigation response from the cyber perspective, but good guys and bad guys are leveraging the same type of AI technology, which of course has opened up the attack vector, and cyber attacks. The incidents are on the rise. But when it comes to deepfakes, when it comes to AI generated content, whether it's misinformation, which of course, I mean that's just become an epidemic in today's day and age. But how do you advise firms when a deep fake has happened, or misinformation, or fake news comes out because of AI generated content?
It's certainly a problem we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the coming years. Part of the problem is there is no bulletproof solution, right? Look at it the same way as cybersecurity. We have the best cybersecurity on our government, on our military, on our intelligence communities, yet they still get hacked. So no matter how good of a PR plan you've got in place, you still have a risk of facing a deep fake type of scenario. The best that you can do is be very proactive, right? Constantly be out in the media, constantly be out here doing interviews, being cited, sharing the knowledge and resources that you have in your community. And then from there, put that energy into actually building a community that cares about the brand. When the community is intensely passionate about your brand, what's going to happen is when these things occur, the community will rally behind you and support you. And in a lot of cases, the deepfakes, fortunately, they're not as technologically advanced as they will be soon, right? Like you or I can't generally go spin up a deepfake of Drew saying something horrendous because the technology is not really open to the public to that level. Now, I'm sure there are entities that have that, but there's still going to be a period of time before we get to the point where it's as easy to do it as some people think that it will be, right? It's not just to click a button and it's there. There's still going to be some time, but being proactive, as is the case in most things, is the solution here. Be out there and be in front of your audience everywhere you can.
Right. And of course, Taylor, another way to strategize around that is to think about, to Jeremy's point, being transparent and being ethical within your communications as well.
Great. Yeah, great question. Even just coming from authenticity and how that would come across, using AI, how I used for building Lively was, for example, for just a mental health perspective, I have a traumatic brain injury, and while I was building Lively, I used AI to cut my production in half, and how I convey, just even with my story about suffering from a traumatic brain injury while owning so many different businesses, and just just showcasing with my doctors and just being vulnerable and being honest with like, hey, this is where I'm progressing. This is where I'm truly lacking and where I need support. So just using AI as more of like a tool and support, and while still maintaining that integrity of showcasing your story.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Taylor. It's not taking an easier route when you're leveraging a generative AI platform as an example. I use it for myself. With my academic work, I use it for the show. Being able to logically order your thoughts, and sometimes AI will make suggestions you didn't think about. Your research is better. You go to places that might not have been, that might not have occurred to you because you just weren't aware that it relates to the topic at hand. I think it is a great tool for saving some of those 2, 3, 4 administrative hours within a project and going to better places for research. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's even helped me find several podcasts that I would like to be a guest on to share more of my story and how I overcame a traumatic brain injury, and then having surgery in November for emergencies. So even just using it as keeping yourself on track and setting reminders to, hey, what's this best keyword that I can use to boost up my visibility? And how can I find another great podcast where I can share my story? It's a brilliant tool. And then just put it into where you can showcase yourself. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and we wish you, of course, continued good health. It's a remarkable recovery just in a few months. Drew, I want to go back to authenticity and content moderation. Again, something that you and I have spoken about online and offline quite extensively. It could be subjective, right? And it could be arbitrary in terms of what you might consider authentic, and what the parameters are within content moderation, from a legal perspective and also from a brand perspective. How are you helping clients manage this?
Sure. As a lawyer who has navigated the everyday, challenges of, ADHD, AI has been a great tool for me to keep my brain just organized. As, Taylor and Jeremy was saying, towards the productivity side of things, that discipline, having that regiment to be able to see everything in front of you, so to speak, and keep things in line. So with clients, one of the first things I preach whenever we're starting off a relationship is having them explain what their why is. understanding their why. A lot of founders, a lot of, businesses, they get so far down that rabbit hole and they forget why they started in the first place. And it's very hard to lose sight of that in today's landscape, right? Because technology is outpacing, the ability for each of us to really have that time to play, to research, to understand and to want to update. So the biggest challenge with clients is figuring out what their why is and how does that translate across every single vertical that they are, implementing across the company throughout their marketing strategies. And at the same time, this paradox of
Yeah.
we preach but don't always practice that very thing.
Yeah. Jeremy, let's expand on that
Yeah.
a bit more because to Andrew's point, the why, what problem are we trying to solve? I think those are the questions that we really do need to answer when you think about the speed of how these technologies are evolving and sometimes this rush to go to market, which, these landscapes are so competitive, is risk mitigation. Are cyber strategies an afterthought, right? Because product and sales and revenue divisions, their priorities are completely different than other areas of the business. And I think, especially over the past 2.5 years with deploying these AI generated supported solutions, I'm not sure if there's a benchmark yet to measure what that ROI is and
Yeah.
how that has impacted the cyber landscape.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes down to how it's being used, right? And how the public is responding to that, right? Are your clients, are your customers excited about how you're using it? If they are, then great, you're on the right track. Take whatever that is, double down on it. But if they're starting to grumble, and we're seeing this happen with a lot of big companies. There was a perfect example of this where I saw PayPal using AI in some of its responses in its chatbot. And a guy had opened up a chat saying, "Hey, I got scammed." And PayPal's response was great, and so that's something you definitely don't want to have happen because, if it doesn't have good guardrails in place, if you don't have a strategy for exactly how this is going to bring value and then execute it in a way that it does, then you're going to start running into problems where the public starts to turn against you. Brand sentiment starts to get a lot weaker and you end up in a bad spot that now not only do you're behind the 8 ball on everything else, you now have this other problem to fix on top of trying to grow.
Yeah, but if we look at the silver lining here, some of these hiccups, and that's partly science and technology, the ethos behind it. You
Yes.
learn from these mistakes, and it only helps to improve upon the product. I think it would be naive to say that, here's a launch, everything's going to be perfect. It only helps to improve each iteration. So I think there is some silver lining to it, but you brought up a great point about guardrails and understanding the operating environment and what our mitigation and response tactics look like. You just don't put a cyber strategy on the books and it's done. It's almost like a fire drill. You're constantly practicing and evolving with the environment.
Right. And you touched on something really interesting there about getting out here, making the mistakes and learning from them. And that's where I see a lot of people going wrong is they're like, well, I'll just wait until it's perfect. I'll wait until everybody's using it and it's smooth and there's no problems. And that's a recipe for disaster. So, getting out there early and learning the mistakes while everyone else is sitting on the sidelines is a great opportunity to create a tremendous advantage.
Yeah. And I also think if you don't acknowledge it, and all three of you have been really clear about this, if you don't get out there and acknowledge, okay, this is what happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. This is how we're working with, regulators, our compliance teams to make it right going forward. I think, hiding underneath a shell, not only is it not compliant, but I don't think it's delivering the right message because Taylor, at the end of the day, your reputation and the experience that's provided to customers and clients, there is no dollar amount on that. You can't pinpoint that. You could talk about valuation and what fundamentals look like, but that perception in terms of how clients think about the company, it's priceless.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's using AI to your advantage, not only just comes in itself. It's just kind of like when you're training like a puppy and, it takes time to build up to where it is of having brand excellence, such as like Coca-Cola and like how they're friendly and how they're family focus. It's using AI and how you can train it to with productivity and even just what I call like little loopholes. And using those loopholes to your advantage, for example, even just how I use like with events and how I was able to use AI to greet those online, and also using an AI robot to showcase to others that it's not just a name to a face, it's also just creating that personal touch, and just saying like, hi, how are you? And just conveying that personal piece.
Yeah. Well, it's a new way how we're going to experience and interact with brands. Andrew, to wrap up here, this is a bit existential, but when you think about advising clients and just when, you're thinking about how this technology evolves in your own head, how much is too much AI, right? Yeah, you want to make sure that some of these authentic ideas still has the human in the loop, if you will.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Preserving creative autonomy is essential, and it gets lost a lot of times because there's so many people in the process, right? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen to where that creative element gets overshadowed at times by formulas, algorithms, the transaction itself. And there's so much more at play, and bringing it back to your why and how are you using AI? That's a second question following, why are you here? That I do have clients answer. And if they can't answer it, then that's where we take a pause and say, now we need to reevaluate. We need to do this kind of internal audit and figure out how you have been applying it. Is it to more of the infrastructure of the company, of the customer, pipeline and the sales mechanisms, or is it more about how you're using it, as Taylor said and as Jeremy had mentioned, the customer interactions, right? How are you conveying that personality to where the person on the other side doesn't feel necessarily that they are talking to an automation, to a robot, but there is an effort to try and get to know who's on the other side. And, in short, right now, a lot of the trends that I'm starting to see in our line of work is you have phishing campaigns that are starting to mimic legitimate brand communications, whether it's, Coca-Cola, Dell, Google itself, Meta, right? So learning to train how you speak to AI, even as a hobby, will start to develop that tone. And for businesses, you have to do that. There's no laziness that can be, avoided here.
All right. Appreciate all of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at NASDAQ.